This is Inside the Jungle, episode 198, recorded June 10th, 2015. Swaggy. Video bandwidth for Inside the Jungle is made possible by the support of our Patreon community. Support Inside the Jungle today by logging on to spnt.tv/Patreon. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. It's Inside the Jungle. We're back on yet another Wednesday evening here at cincyjungle.com. Glad you could join us. It's Wednesday, so we're talking all things Bengals here on Inside the Jungle. I'm joined by the fearsome twosome, I guess. Yeah, I would say that. I'm scared of you two. Anthony Cosenza and Scott Bantel. AC, how's things going out on the West Coast?
Yeah, the terrifying threesome. That could be another one for it. No, it's going okay. The weather kind of seems a little bit like Ohio weather the last couple of days. Real muggy and a little bit of sprinkle, but I'm spoiled, I guess, so whatever.
Yeah, you are.
How are you doing?
I don't even want to talk about your weather. I'm doing all right. I'm here with you guys talking Bengals on a Wednesday night. Scott, how about you? You feeling good?
Doing well here. Just moving a bit slow tonight.
Any particular reason?
Yeah, maybe the 90-degree heat. I'm not sure.
Well, it is June, and it's going to be here, so get used to it. Settle in, Scotty B. It's going to be warm.
Will do.
All right. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email me insidethejungle@spnt.tv. You can also hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Nick Superling. We've got 4 or 5 stories we'll get to this week, or we'll try to get to this week. And, of course, we'll open up the phone lines a little bit later and talk to Bengals fans around the world. Let's start things off with our good friends over at ESPN, shall we? According to ESPN, the Bengals roster has gotten worse in 2015. The headline is kind of an attention grabber right off the get-go, right, guys? I mean, I don't know if they've gotten worse. I don't know if they've gotten better. I mean, how do we even know that? It's June.
Yeah, that's correct. It's kind of difficult to tell. I wouldn't say that they made leaps and bounds of improvement. They may not have needed to, I guess, since they've consistently been double-digit winners over the last 4 seasons. So I thought they did some good things in free agency, some things I didn't like. I would have liked to have seen more immediate impact guys in the draft. You probably only have about 2 or 3 guys that will be heavy rotational players right away from this draft class. But I mean, they didn't really have too many significant losses, and in fact, some of the guys that were hurt, from 2013 and maybe dragged a little bit last year. That sounds like they're doing better, and they're getting more guys back. And as long as they boost the pass rush, which they made it a pretty good concerted effort to do so, as long as that improves, then I would say they've improved at least a little. By how much, it's very difficult to say.
In 2014, Scott, they were ranked 7th, and now here in this ranking here in 2015, they're 9th. So it's not like it's a huge drop-off, but it is regression, I guess. According to Sam Monson over at ESPN, he got together with Pro Football Focus, and he's saying some of the starters who should be upgraded are Peko, A.J. Hawk, which are we even sure A.J. Hawk's a starter at this point? Ray Maluga, Russell Bodine, and Mohamed Sanu. Now, Mohamed Sanu is not a starter. He was due to injury, but he's not a starter on this team either. So this analysis kind of seems a little shaky from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, we've talked about this ad nauseum on the show, and, ESPN and their laser reporting, and I think this is just a perfect example. You talk about a guy who refers to Mohamed Sanu as the starter, and I think he forgets that Mohamed Sanu wasn't the starter. Marvin Jones was, and they're getting him back. So, I agree with Anthony. I don't know that they're necessarily better. I mean, they didn't really add anything, but when you take a look at it, who did they lose? I mean, they brought back all of their starters. They should get a starter back in Marvin Jones. They should get another starter back in Tyler Eifert. They got rid of the only guy they really lost was a 36-year-old cornerback, and they're replacing him with 2 first-round cornerbacks, with a year or 2 experience under their belt. So I don't really see how they're saying this. That another team they have up there high is the Baltimore Ravens, And the last time I checked, the Baltimore Ravens lost a bunch. One person being Haloti Ngata. So, I think this is again the lazy reporting of ESPN just basically picking teams that have names and going off of names rather than actually taking a look at rosters to see whose roster actually got better and who's got worse.
Yeah, I mean, I, I guess it's June, right? I mean, I can't harp on that enough. He's mentioning the top 5 players: Carlos Dunlap, Geno Atkins, Vontaze Burfict, Andrew Whitworth, and AJ Green. Can't really argue that. But again, like Scott said, AC, I mean, some of the guys that they lost weren't exactly big losses for the Bengals, and he fails to mention that they did get a guy and Michael Johnson in free agency who you can pencil in as the starter right now as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one guy who I think, and he's actually a rookie, one guy who I think is going to be key to a lot of the defensive success actually is Paul, or Pete. He goes by PJ now, I guess. PJ Dodd. I think if he can grab um, one of the starting spots, then I think all of a sudden this defense solidifies itself. And one thing that Scott, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but one thing that a lot of people forget about the Bengals, they remember the injured team at the end of the year and the one that kind of sputtered into the playoffs and didn't play well into the playoffs. They forget that team that was pretty healthy at the beginning of the year through the first 3 weeks, where they beat the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore and absolutely trounced 2 other teams, Atlanta and Tennessee. So I think it's once they get healthy, they've added a couple more pieces. Maybe they utilize that rotation up front. If Dawson can step in and maybe help out that linebacker group immediately, then all of a sudden things aren't looking as bleak as ESPN and PFF are making it.
Yeah, and I think Nick hit on it when he said AJ Hawk. Are we even considering him a starter? I think that's a big one where, he talks about AJ Hawk needing to be upgraded. Well, AJ Hawk's brought in here essentially to be a backup, and if needed, then he can play for Burfict. But I think it's a guy who doesn't really know the Bengals roster very well and is sitting here saying, oh, they're worse. I don't see how you add what I would say is one of the best number 2 wide receivers in Marvin Jones, a guy that had 10 touchdowns the previous year, and then a threat like Tyler Eifert, and say the team's not, at the very least, as good as they were last year. I mean, you take a look last year, coming into the season, you didn't know what they had in Jeremy Hill. Well, now you do. And that guy is, probably a top 5, top 10 back in the NFL. And so now you've got him paired with Giovanni Bernard. So, I think sometimes when you break down rosters, people seem to forget that you don't necessarily have to add anything to get better. You can simply bring back what you had, and that makes you better by a consistency standpoint. We see it year in, year out with these teams that are good. They bring back the core of their team. They don't add a whole bunch outside of what they had the year before.
Right, and the big question mark. I talked about Dawson, but Burfict being available and healthy at least early on in the year and being effective. Not taking a little bit of the backslide that we saw out of Geno Atkins and Leon Hall from their respective big injuries in 2014. But if he can come back relatively early on and play good football, he's listed as one of the top 5 PFF players on this team, and I think we all know what he meant to this defense. We saw when he was out throughout the year, he kind of was in and out for the first handful of games, and then he ended up being shelved the rest of the season. But you saw the impact that him not being there had, and not only the linebacker group, but really on every level of the defense during a stretch. And they kind of clamped down on some things as the year went on, but him being able to come back and be healthy, I think, is a biggie too.
Now you bring up a good point there too, and another guy you mentioned is Geno Atkins. Whereas last year he's coming back off the injury. This year, you would think that he'd be close to back to where he was before. So that's another spot where they didn't upgrade by getting someone new, but they should be upgrading based on the guy they're getting in Geno Atkins. You take a look at Leon Hall, another guy you mentioned, whereas last year they were kind of relying on him as a starter or a slot corner. He may be 4th on the depth chart this year. It very well may be Kirkpatrick, Denard, Jones, and then Hall. So there's another spot where they improved by, they didn't add anything, but just improved based on who's actually starting.
One of the players that, and I don't, again, when he's healthy, there's no doubt about it that Vontaze Burfict is a top 5 player on this defense or on this team. But right now, I don't know that you can say that he is when you question in the fact that he may not play in his rehabilitation. But one of the names who is at least in my opinion, is Jeremy Hill. And not a lot mentioned about him here in this article, but he was mentioned along with Giovanni Bernard recently here that these two, this duo, Bernard and Jeremy Hill, have been named the number 3 best running back tandem in the AFC, not the NFL, but the AFC. What are your guys' thoughts on that news? I mean, it's not like they get a trophy for this or anything, but it was another ESPN article that did feel that these two are the 2 best in the AFC as far as the top 3 go.
Yeah, another one I'd say is somewhat lazy reporting. I mean, one of the teams he has ranked.
We're going to rail on ESPN tonight, aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, well, when you rank a backfield like the Steelers ahead of the Bengals, you've got, a good back in Le'Veon Bell, no doubt. But, behind him, you drop off to 32-year-old injury-prone D'Angelo Williams. So, and behind him, I have no idea who they have. So, I'm not sure how you can take that backfield and say it's better than a potential Rookie of the Year candidate in Jeremy Hill and another solid back in Giovanni Bernard. I don't see it. And in the Bills, I mean, McCoy had a down year last year. I don't know who they have behind him, but I just have a tough time saying that the Bills have a better backfield than the Bengals either. And that's not me trying to be a homer. That's just looking at it, objectively. There's no way I'm going to say Le'Veon Bell and D'Angelo Williams is a better backfield than Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard. I don't know anyone that watches football in their right mind that would say that.
Right, and I mean, we talked before the show. The one team that came to mind for me that has a really good stable of running backs would be the Philadelphia Eagles, and obviously they're in the NFC, and you pointed that out, Nick. They have DeMarco Murray, Ryan Matthews, Darren Sproles, so they've got a lot of weapons there too, and that's a team that really comes to mind at that position group. I mean, I like that the Bengals are so high up in the AFC, but there is kind of a little bit of a slight in terms of respect level too coming with that. So take it for what you will. There was an NFL.com article as well that kind of ranked team triplets, if you will, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and, it was the same old song. The Bengals were middle of the pack, and the same old song and dance is because of their quarterback. So, you got to kind of take it for what you will, and it doesn't really matter where they rank. If they win games and are effective and stay healthy, that's what truly matters. We've talked about it a little bit, too. I think Mickey talked about it last week specifically. I'd like to see the Bengals do a little bit more of the wishbone type of deal where they have both the guys in at the same time, or even use Bernard as a slot guy every once in a while, or what have you. Get those guys both on the field at the same time, not only keeping them happy by getting them both playing time, but you being creative and using guys to their respective strengths.
No, there's no doubt about it that Le'Veon Bell a year ago was probably by far the best back in the NFL if you just look at his overall production throughout the season. However, if you look at the last 9 weeks of the year, Jeremy Hill actually outrushed Le'Veon Bell, guys. And, I mean, Le'Veon Bell, for all the news he made a year ago, and, we saw how much the Steelers were affected by his absence in the playoffs. And we saw what he did to us single-handedly in Cincinnati a year ago as well. But, I mean, there's not that much of a difference between Le'Veon Bell and Jeremy Hill from a production standpoint. Jeremy Hill just got a later start.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Jeremy Hill really went on that tear the last half of the year. So, and really, he was kind of a godsend for the entire team because they were hurt. Their offense wasn't really producing. Some of their defense, you could tell, guys were getting really tired because they weren't able to use that rotation. So what did the team really need? They needed a strong running game to control the football and control the clock, and that's really what got them back into the playoffs that second part of the season. So One thing that is undervalued about Hill is his ability to catch. I mean, he's not a great receiver, but he has the ability to do that and make some plays that way. And I think the Bengals, they used it sparsely with him last year, but he does have that ability, and it's nice to have two backs that you use often that can both catch if you need them to.
And we continue to praise Hill for the year he had a year ago, got over 1,000 yards. But when you look at our backup at this point, well, we'd like to think he's our backup, but who knows? He could be the starter game one, Scott. But Giovanni Bernard had 1,000 all-purpose yards a year ago, and it's the second straight year he's had 1,000 all-purpose yards. And he's got 99 catches in 29 career games. So here's another guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. I don't know if that's necessarily a strength of D'Angelo Williams there in Pittsburgh, which, by the way, I didn't even know he went to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and I mean, not that we should use fantasy as a way to justify anything, but ask fantasy owners how great D'Angelo Williams has been the last 5 years. I mean, the guy's basically been dead. You know, he shows up for 1 or 2 games a year, and the rest of the games he's, you know, penciled in for 20 yards. So, you know, I just, again, I would take Bernard, you know, leaps and bounds over D'Angelo Williams. You know, I think Le'Veon Bell and Jeremy Hill. You know, I think Bell's probably the better back. I think it's pretty close. But, you know, when you start going down the depth chart, then I take Giovanni Bernard way ahead of D'Angelo Williams. And when you go 3 deep, I take Rex Burkhead way ahead of who's third on their depth chart, probably Dre Archer.
Well, I have to step back and correct myself. I said that this was an ESPN article. ESPN tabbed Jeremy Hill as the 5th best running back in the league, but it was a Scout.com article that ranked the Bengals with the number 3 running back group there in the AFC. Buffalo comes in at number 1, Steelers number 2, Bengals 3, Texans 4th, and the Kansas City Chiefs 5. So, I mean, if you think about it, guys, they're in some pretty good company as far as the teams around the AFC. Baltimore's coming in there at 6, Miami at 7, and New York, the Jets with Chris Ivory, Stephen Ridley, and now Zach Stacy at 8. So, pretty, you know, if you think about it, with some of the teams they're up against, I'm a little surprised to see Buffalo number 1, but they've got some good names there as well up there in New York. So I guess it's a good group to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, whether they're first or third, that's still pretty good. I just happen to disagree with the teams that they put ahead of them.
Yeah. AC, you got anything to add on this? You were losing. Oh, little choppy.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he's saying. Holy cow. That's a hard. All right.
It's totally an
Wow. And
list.
Anthony is speaking in slow motion.
We have no idea what just happened, and yeah, hopefully we'll get him back. That was a hard little. The internet gremlin got a hold of AC there. Love to hear your thoughts, though, Bengals fans. If you want to get in touch, email us insidethejungle@spnt.tv and let us know what your thoughts are as far as the rankings. Is this a top 3 group in the AFC, or is this a top 3 group in the NFL? I'd be interested to see where this team would fall if they did an all 32 ranking amongst the 2 conferences. That'd be interesting debate as well. Let's see, what else can we talk about this week? Oh, let's talk about Denard, shall we? It sounds like, from what we're hearing in OTAs, that Darqueze Denard, Scott, is having a really good camp, and that's good news for the Bengals.
It's definitely good news for the Bengals. I mean, he's a guy that whether he starts or not, I think they're going to lean on a lot more than they did last year. I mean, last year, you know, more so a set of the circumstances that he was in, but you know, they didn't use him much. Part of the reason why is because they didn't necessarily need him. But this year, with the departure of Newman, you know, with what you saw last year in Leon Hall, I think you're going to see a lot of Denard. Even if it's not as a starter, I think you're going to see him in there a lot as a slot cover, you know, as a slot corner. So It's good to hear that he's looking good in camp again. I take any good news in camp, I take with a grain of salt because the guys are running around in shorts and t-shirts. But um, you know, it's not bad news, I guess.
Um, Today, I saw some tweets from folks that cover the Bengals talking about how great Brandon Tate is looking at camp. Caught a touchdown pass from Randy Dalton today. So, again, like you just said, Scott, you take it with a grain of salt. But we're talking Darqueze Dennard, AC, and we don't know if he's going to be the starter come the fall. But we know that this is a first-round draft pick. We know how much the Bengals like to wait as long as they possibly can to throw their first-round draft picks out there in the secondary. Not sure why it is that they do it that way, but Marvin has his reasons. But all signs are pointing up for the second-year cornerback.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear the show after I download it. Sounds like I was on an auto-tune machine, I guess, according to all you guys. But sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Yeah, it's always good news when you hear good things out of a young guy at camp that's unproven, and that's kind of an important leap. There's a kind of a passing of the torch that's occurring this year at that position. Newman is gone on and left, and Adam Jones. We don't know exactly what his role is going to be. He could be a starter, but they may say you're going to be our kick returner and kind of a fill-in corner. So we'll see. I think Dennard sees a lot more time this year. I think he's going to have a good impact on special teams as well. I think he kind of contributed there a little bit as a gunner and cover guy there. But I'm excited. I think he may not have the speed or the length that Drake Kirkpatrick has, but I think he's got a little bit more of a polished background from a positional standpoint. So maybe the learning curve won't be as steep for him as it was for Kirkpatrick. But this Bengals team needs turnovers, and they didn't really get sacks last year. They didn't get a ton of turnovers, and that ultimately kind of started taking its effect. And obviously, pass rush up front, that affects interceptions heavily. So if the Bengals are able to get more pass rush up front, that should make life pretty easy for some of these younger defensive backs that they're throwing out there.
I'm wondering too, Scott, is this as much as I love what Leon Hall has done for this team in years past, he's certainly not the same Leon Hall that we're accustomed to. When you've teared both your Achilles, it's not easy to come back from. So you got to give him credit for that. I'm just wondering where he's going to fall on the depth chart now that we're hearing such good things from Kirkpatrick and from Dennard here in camp.
Yeah, it will be kind of interesting to see where he ends up on the depth chart. You would like to think that Kirkpatrick and Dennard can surpass him. I mean, that's what you drafted these guys to do, so you would like to see that. What Hall's done coming back from two Achilles is, from my standpoint, amazing. I mean, yes, he was not the player we've seen in the past last year. By normal standards, it was amazing. By NFL cornerback standards, I think he was a little subpar. I think this will be a big year for him because if I remember correctly, this is the last year of his deal, and it could very well be the end of his time in a Bengals uniform if he doesn't get back to form. It could also be the end of his career if he doesn't get back into form. I don't know a lot of teams are going to line up to sign a guy who's 30 years old and has torn both Achilles. So, this regime in Marvin has shown a tendency to go with veterans over top of these young draft picks. So I wouldn't rule him out still as a starter or as a slot corner, but I think deep down I would hope that your two number one picks in Dennard and Kirkpatrick can unseat him. And quite frankly, I like him on the team, but I kind of hope he is fourth on the depth chart because from a skill and talent level, I think that's probably where he falls.
Yeah, but where Marvin ranks these bets. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked, Scott, if Leon Hall gets a contract extension. I mean, that's just with this coaching staff and this management, they value the loyalty and they value those vets. So I wouldn't be surprised if it goes that way too.
No, you're right. I mean, you take a look at how long they stuck with a guy like Newman. You take a look at a guy like Pecco is another good example. We've seen it before at the center position where they'll stick with the veteran over a younger player that might be doing better. So you're absolutely right. I wouldn't rule it out. This is a coaching staff that certainly leans towards the veterans over the young guys, even if the young guys are high draft picks. So again, I hope if they go with Hall over one of the young guys, I hope it's because we actually see that he's playing better. I hope it's not simply because they're worried about trusting the young guy. I hope it's because he outplays the young guy, and I'm fine with that. If he outplays him, I'm fine with that. But if he looks like he did last year, I really want to see Denard and Kirkpatrick there instead.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you, man. I would much rather see them go young, go with youth, go with athleticism and speed over mental smarts, maybe. I mean, that's probably where Leon Hall right now has the edge over Kirkpatrick and Denard, is that he's seen a lot more, he's been through a lot more reps, and just has the mental edge over those two. But at some point, you can't ignore just the raw talent and the raw athleticism that these two bring to the table, and it seems like that's what's been missing from this secondary the last few years.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think that the thing that I do love about Hall is I do love his professionalism. I do love his savvy veteran ability. But one position where that veteran savviness, can really be exposed if they don't have the speed and the skill to go with it is a position like cornerback. He's tasked with covering the fastest guys on the field. We saw that last year in the Pittsburgh game where he just got absolutely toasted. I can't remember who it was that beat him, Martavius Bryant. I'm not sure, but he was,
He's still running.
Yeah, exactly. So the one thing with Hall I've wondered, and I don't know what you guys think on this, is I look back on, Hall does remind me a bit of a guy like a Rod Woodson. I'm not saying he's, the same caliber, but he's that good solid veteran that I've often wondered, could he make a transition to say Woodson did? And he's lost a little bit of speed, but that savviness that he has and the tackling ability and the tenacity that he has, I think he actually could be a decent safety in the later part of his career.
That's interesting. He is a good tackler. There's no question about that. But then again, with a guy with his injury history, I'd be really worried about putting him back there. That's just my take.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if he can make a transition, but he seems like a guy that probably could.
It's very possible.
Yeah, they said the same thing about Newman because of age and whatnot. I mean, that was kind of some chatter that was going on there. But I think Hall's niche in the pros is a slot corner. I think he actually covers tight ends pretty well. We've seen him jump routes on passes that are intended for tight ends, and he is physical. He's not the biggest guy, so I don't know. But maybe if these young guys that they're relying on, if Aloka decides to bolt, if Darren Smith or Josh Shaw don't work out at safety, maybe that's something you tinker with at the end of Hall's career. It's not a bad idea. I just think some of those position switches like that are easier said than done a lot of times. And Hall's been a corner his entire life, from what I gather. So just throwing him, and not that safety's too much of a different position, but it doesn't always work out all that well as a lot of people could think. But still not a bad idea.
It seems like we cleared up some of those gremlins with the AAC. Now that we got you back in the fold, your thoughts on Denard and what he's doing with camp? It sounds like he's having a good camp and that the Bengals have some high expectations for him this fall.
Yeah, it's good news. That might have been the part that I was talking about that I was in slow-mo there, so hopefully it doesn't cut out on me again here. I apologize about that. But yeah, I mean, it's always good to hear a youngster do well in camp. It's always good that it's a guy that's been unproven. So let's see. I mean, there's always that talk in camp. So and so looks very good this year. He's added weight. Kind of all the different rhetoric that you hear for certain players at camp. But I mean, you drafted this guy in the first round for a reason. He was considered one of, if not the top cornerback in his draft class. So at some point, I heard you guys talking about favoring veterans. That's definitely a stigma of this coaching staff. So at some point, you got to get these guys on the field. You got to see if they're going to pan out. And sometimes it's risky. Sometimes it's for better or for worse. But at some point, you got to get these high picks on the field and playing. And hopefully, they're going to do that this year with Denard and get him some time out there.
Love to hear your thoughts, though, Bengals fans. I think now we will we'll open up the phone lines to get in touch with us. 404-946-3397 is the number to call. If you want to get in touch with us via Skype as well, you can. Inside the Jungle is the Skype account. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Bengals fans. Get in touch and have your voice heard here on the program. One more topic to get to before we get out of here. Andrew Whitworth. We love Andrew Whitworth. We love Whit, right, guys? And this week he's come out and said that the Bengals need more swagger. So, Scott, define for me swagger and how do they get it?
I think they get swagger by winning in the playoffs. You know, I don't think coming out and saying you need more swagger is going to help at all. I think you know, I hear what he's saying, and I think we've all iterated this about the Bengals in the past. Is, you know, when they play the more physical teams, the bullies on the block, be it the Steelers, the Ravens, you know, they do seem to get pushed around, and we want to see a more physical, a more confident team, and I think that's what he's referring to. You know, so I agree with him there. I just don't know. Yeah. I mean, again, it's kind of like that offseason stuff where it's like, you know, Dalton's becoming a better leader. Well, okay, how about you just get on the field and win? So, you know, I think if they start winning and they start taking care of business and you know, beating teams, you know, convincingly, I think that will establish the swagger.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Whitworth said. I don't know exactly what he's pinpointing it towards, or like Scott said, I don't know how you necessarily gain it aside from winning and winning big games. Unfortunately, it's just kind of been I've mentioned this phrase a bunch of times, organizational culture thing. You know, it's just the team still, because of, you know, whether it's fans or, you know, certain players they've brought in, they expect a bad thing to happen. And even these successful teams, I mean, they've been much better at it, especially under Marvin Lewis, but there's still something ingrained in this team's DNA with, you know, expecting a bad play to happen, or, you know, you fall behind and everyone kind of looks at each other on the sideline type of thing. So they've got to be confident in who they are, who they have in that locker room, and you know, maybe getting some of these younger guys out on the field that are high draft picks, maybe getting some of them out there will help. Obviously, winning breeds confidence, so you have to keep doing that, and they have a good team already. Maybe some of these things we're perceiving as, you know, insults to the Bengals in terms of rankings and these arbitrary lists. Maybe some of those things are actually good things for this team if they actually pay attention. I mean, a lot of players say they don't pay attention to what the media says and all this kind of stuff. I think they pay attention more than they let on, and if they read some of this stuff, man, why are we down low on this list, or why are we here? You know, maybe they read that and they get a little irritated, and they want to have something to prove to the rest of the league. But they have to be able to go in and beat these good teams, and especially the Ravens and the Steelers, and you have to play as physical as them, if not more so. I don't know exactly what needs to change to be able to achieve that, but until that changes, this team's going to be stuck in that 9 to 10 win range where they keep getting bounced out of the playoffs. They have to figure it out.
Let's go to the jungle line and welcome in an old friend of the show, Mr. Fatal Content. Fatal, what's up, buddy?
Hey, what's up, gentlemen, man? I really missed you guys, man. How's everything?
How's life down in South Beach with no NBA playoffs?
It's actually pretty good. Some people might say it sucks because they're actually seeing the sorry Cavs win, but hopefully that changes soon.
Can't wait to see that NBA trophy here in Ohio.
Stop it. Don't get your hopes up. You already know how it is over there, man. You guys could be 10 minutes away from it and still lose it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's just a Cleveland thing, though. Well, I guess that's an Ohio thing, maybe. I don't know. What's on your mind tonight, Fatal?
Nothing much, man. Like I said, I called it a good time when you guys said adding some swagger, man. I think the way we had some swagger is we had the school that invented swagger, man. We need to add some more Hurricanes. I'm going to keep saying that, man. But no, in all seriousness, man, I'm actually I missed the show for a few weeks, man, so I actually tried to stop being a scumbag and call you guys and just keying on you guys been doing a real good job, and just say that I'm hyped for this season, man. As always, I can't wait, man. Football season is. I just can't wait till it starts, man.
It's here, man. I mean, I know it's June, but I'll tell you what, it seems like football just starts earlier and earlier. I know training camp's not for 6 more weeks or so, but it's basically here, and it's exciting times.
Oh yeah, very. I actually saw an article on Bleacher Report that had I don't know if you guys read it. I don't know if you guys read that stuff that much, but it actually had us. It said that one of our secret weapons this year would be Marcus Hardison. I wonder what you guys' thoughts on that was.
Well, it depends. It depends on a few things. One, it depends on what's going on with Pecco and how well if he can bounce back. He had a pretty bad year last year. I think we all would agree on that. I think too, depending on the health of Brandon Thompson as well. I mean, Hardison, if I'm not mistaken, guys, he's the defensive tackle, right? I mean, he's got some guys ahead of him on the depth chart, but who knows? Maybe he comes in and he's another one of those Pat Sims type, somebody drafted real low that no expected. I mean, even Geno Atkins was a 4th-round draft pick, AC. So who knows? Maybe this guy can come in and bring that spark at defensive tackle.
Yeah, it's weird. He was actually a defensive end in a weird defensive system at Arizona State, but he played defensive end at close to 300 pounds. So the Bengals are kicking him into defensive tackle. I think he's going to be more of the pass rushing defensive tackle, one of those hybrid DN, D-tackle type of guys where they bring him in, assuming he makes the club and everything, that they bring him in on passing situations. So you still, again, using that rotation and getting pressure up the middle along with some of those big guys they have on the outside. So the Bengals love big defensive linemen. They don't have any of these speedy finesse guys. They don't have any of those tweener guys. I thought they could use someone like that, but they like guys that are good all-around defensive linemen. They can play the run, they can play the pass a bit, and then they have guys that could kick in, like potentially Hardison, kick inside on 3rd downs, passing downs, and maybe create some pressure. So I actually like that pick. He seems like a freak athletically. I think he ran like a 4.8 40 at almost 300 pounds, which is pretty awesome. But then again, you got to translate that on at the pro level and get some production. But I like that they've got some competition there. They brought in Michael Johnson, they brought in Pat Sims, they brought in Hardison, and then now, they have the kind of familiar faces there too with Devin Still and Pico and all those other guys. So let the best guys win the job and play.
Yeah, I think the one thing with Hardison is he kind of has what this coaching staff covets, which is that versatility. You mentioned he played defensive end in college. They're going to move him into defensive tackle, but he's that type of guy that they love, the guy that can play both end and tackle. Like a Wallace Gilberry, where on passing situations you can move him in to the defensive tackle position and still get some pass rush as well. So. I think he makes the team, and like Anthony said, I think his value will come in on the defensive line rotation. Where he comes in kind of situationally, but as we saw with Wallace Gilberry in the past, guys that come in situationally can make a good impact. With fresh legs. So that's all I got on him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good for the rotation. I mean, you mentioned that word, Scott. They really missed that this year. Fatal content. They missed having guys rotate in and being fresh because you could tell. I mean, they had no legs down the stretch, and that the fresher the defensive front is, the more they can get to the quarterback and put pressure on the quarterback, which means more turnovers, more errant passes. It all ties into it, and I think the Bengals saw that a year ago. That's why they brought Sims back. That's why they brought Michael Johnson back, and oh, by the way, they drafted Hardison, which I think is going to be a good, solid pick for the Bengals.
Indeed. I can't wait, man. We actually have extreme depth everywhere, and I just can't wait to see what we do, especially on defense, see if that improves on the Gunther this year.
We'll see. We will see. Hey, Fatal, appreciate the call, bud.
No problem, man. Hey, man, I just had a question tonight, man. I was wondering if you guys can give me you put on your prediction hats and tell me what order you guys have the AFC North in this year in terms of power rankings, maybe. You guys can give me that.
All right. Hey, we'll answer that question for you, Fatal. Appreciate the call, bud.
All right, guys. Take it easy. Who they?
That's Fatal. bringing the question of the night. I think it's pretty obvious we're all going to put the Bengals number one, right? Duh, right? No? I mean, they are the runners-up in the AFC North. I could argue that Pittsburgh did not improve this year. I don't think Baltimore has, and we know about Cleveland. So if it's me, I'm going Bengals, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cleveland in that order. How about you, AC?
I tend to agree, I guess. I'm reluctant to just automatically say the Bengals are top dogs in the division just because those teams have such decorated histories, and really coaching is the thing that kind of sets those two teams apart from Cincinnati. I think this division cannibalizes each other. I think it's all going to be pretty competitive. Even Cleveland will be probably a pretty scrappy team once again. So, you could go 1A, 1B. But for now, I guess I'd tend to agree with you, Nick.
How about you, Scott?
If you forced me, I'd have the Bengals, but I'd kind of have a 1A, 1B, 1C, and Bengals, Steelers, Baltimore. Well, the reason I say that is I certainly think the Bengals are the best team from a roster construction standpoint, but I have a hard time putting the Bengals ahead of the two teams that both have Super Bowl winning quarterbacks on their team. I have a tough time putting the Bengals and Dalton ahead of them when we've yet to win a Super Bowl. Again, I would, if pressed, I'd say Bengals, Steelers, Ravens, Browns, but very close in the top three.
Good question. It was good to hear from Fatal as well. Let's go back to the jungle line and welcome in John from Kentucky. John, what's up, buddy?
Hey, good to talk to you again, Nick. Anthony, Scott, good to see you all. I like, Ender from England. I like his picks, Bengals, Steelers, Ravens, Browns. That's probably the list I would go. I think Cincinnati's roster is pretty good overall. Let's not forget last year, for the first time in NFL history, there was a division. Every team was tied at 7-4 late in the season. Remember that?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it was 7-4, but you're right. It was all four teams in the division had a good shot at making the postseason, and we all know what happened with Cleveland. They kind of fell off the wayside there, and they had issues at quarterback clearly. But you're right. It's the toughest division in football. There's no question about it.
Right. As I've mentioned before, the Bengals, we have to play the Ravens the last game of the season. And you said on the last podcast, when I called in, I think it was the week before last, that you would rather see Cincinnati play Baltimore rather than Pittsburgh. And, I've thought about that. You might be right. That might be the lesser of the two evils. I would prefer Cleveland. But then again, the Browns have beaten us before, too. But I don't know. It seems like we could get out of a Cleveland game with less injuries than we would, playing Pittsburgh. But that's something Cincinnati has not done well in the playoffs with Andy Dalton or Marvin Lewis. But that's the one piece of the puzzle there that I can't stop ignoring. Cincinnati never has an easy last game because of their division, and they tend to be a little bit beat up before, they even play the first playoff game. But I think it's just so crucial that Dalton has a really good tight end, one that's healthy and one that can play, at the end of the season. Something he's never had in Cincinnati. I don't mean to insult Gresham, but, I feel about Gresham right now kind of like the coaches do, like not really depressed to see him gone and glad to see some new faces there. Now, as far as Domata Peko goes, he didn't have a lot of help from his linebackers. He did get pushed back a lot last year. Maybe he can do better again this coming season. And I like what you all were saying, too, about Leon Hall, that Darquez Dennard and Drake Kirkpatrick hopefully, will be filling his position sooner rather than later. And overall, I think the Bengals look pretty good. What do you think, Nick?
Oh, there's no question. I think they're one of the better teams in the AFC. They draft well. They don't go out and overspend in free agency. They fill holes where they need to fill holes in free agency. Do they make the big splashes? I know AC wants them to go out and spend a ton of money on these high-priced, big-name free agents, which I totally get that side of it too. But you can't argue with the regular season results. I don't know if going out and spending money in free agency is going to guarantee them a victory in the playoffs. I think it still comes down to coaching, which you've also called it many times on this show, called and
Yep.
put into question, the head coach and Marvin Lewis and where this team stands. Can he ever win the playoff game? I don't know. I don't know if it's in his DNA, if it can happen, honestly.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
6 tries,
I
that tells
agree.
you what you need to know, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you've heard me many times. The entire team just doesn't look good. I think it was Anthony said on the last podcast that the Bengals in the playoffs don't look like the team we've been seeing in the regular season the last 5 or 6 years. They look like the team from the 90s in the playoffs. And you know what? I thought about that, and that's about right. They, especially in the second half, they just don't do anything. I don't know what's wrong, but but we still haven't had a tight end that can really dominate the game. And I just think I've just wanted to see Dalton get that player, the Gronkowski, the Heath Miller, that type of a tight end. I was hoping we would have that with Eifert, and I thought we did the first game of the season last year. But of course, he went down and was gone for the rest of the year. So I don't know. I just think that's crucial for a quarterback like Dalton because he loves it. Quick pass, which is just, isn't that ideal for your tight end? Running that crossing route right across the middle.
Yeah, it is. I think they've got big plans for Eifert this year. I know they've got big plans for the Tyler twins. Yes, I said it, AC. The Tyler twins. Tyler Croft, who they drafted this spring. I know they've got big plans for the tight ends, and they're going to have to step up big as well because you still have question marks about Marvin Jones. Can he stay healthy? We don't know. We'll hopefully find out, and hopefully he does stay healthy here in 2015. Hey, appreciate the call, John.
Okay,
Uday. That's John from Kentucky here on the Jungle Line, giving us a ring here on Inside the Jungle. We've got time for maybe a call or two, but before we do that, swagger. Do we need Scott? This team. It comes down to the coach, right? And does Marvin Lewis have the swagger?
Yeah, and you mentioned it. Can they ever win in the playoffs? And I think that's the biggest key when you take a look at, the way this team seems to disappear, or if you want to use the term swagger, fine. If you want to say that they don't have swagger, take a look at the coach. And not to start conspiracies again, but is this Whitworth calling out Marvin Lewis? Because there is no swagger. There is no sense of confidence that you get from this head coach. And in the past, he's kind of poo-pooed every player that he's had that's kind of been brash. He's kind of tried to calm them down. And take a look at the teams that have been successful in this league. They have coaches that have that fire. You got Belichick. Yes, he's generally unemotional, but you see him get fired up at times, and you see a guy that wants to win at all costs. Cheating jokes aside, you take a look at the Harbaugh brothers, Jim and John. They both got that attitude about them. You take a look at in Pittsburgh. There's another one. I mean, the teams. Pete Carroll's another one. The teams that have been successful, they do have a coach that has that fire about him, and you just haven't seen that in Marvin. We've talked about it before. In the playoffs, he looks scared on the sidelines. I mean, he looks like he's about to throw up. So I think when you talk about swagger, you do have to look at the head coach first. The teams take on the personality of their head coach, and in the playoff games, their head coach looks scared, and in the playoff games, the Bengals have looked scared. So I think when you talk about swagger, it's got to start from the top.
One thing, and I totally agree with what you said, Scott. One thing that I would say that maybe as a defense and I guess overall game plan to kind of breed this swagger or confidence, and you've seen it more in recent drafts, is a concerted effort of getting guys from big programs in the draft, winning programs in the draft, and bringing those guys who have basically won their entire football life. They're used to winning. They know how to win, and bringing those types of people into this locker room. So I think that helps. And these are players that aren't used to the quote unquote Bengals culture of the 90s and maybe even into today, if you still believe in that kind of thing. But these are guys that know how to win, are used to winning, and they've made a concerted effort to bring those kinds of players into this locker room to help breed that through the rest of the team.
Swagger. I just wanted to say that word. Do we have swagger here on this podcast? I think we do. Let's do some shout-outs, shall we? Shout-out! Scott, how about you start us off this week?
Well, I mean, when you talk about swagger, we got a representative from the West Coast, which West Coast alone brings swagger to the show. So, I didn't give Anthony a shout-out last week, but let's have it this week. The West Coast shout-out to Anthony for the swagger he brings. I'll give a real shout out though this week. I always like to shout out my new followers. I got another new follower this week, Fat Jungle Cat #1. So shout out to Fat Jungle Cat #1. Welcome aboard. I will try to entertain you as I do all my Twitter followers.
Good one, Scott. How about you, AC?
Scott, I love it, but it might be a little too late, buddy. It's a week later now. I've already had my feelings hurt. I appreciate it though, anyways, buddy. I'm going to shout out, I don't know if I've ever shouted him out before, but Alamin Udin, I believe is how you say his name. He's in the chat room, and from what I think he follows me on Twitter too, but good listener. And then I want to throw a little belated happy birthday to you, Nick. I know it was, I believe it was last weekend, so a little shout out to you there as well.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Saturday, June 6th. It was a fun time. We went to Put in Bay, first time ever going there. The kids enjoyed the ferry ride in the lake in Lake Erie. It's cool. I'd never been there. I'm ready to go back. That's how much fun I had up there at Put in Bay. We left before all the crazies, all the young bachelor parties and all the crazy hooligans that go up to Put in Bay. It's the Key West of the North. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. I'm dropping knowledge, dropping nuggets here on Inside the Jungle. I'm going to give a shout out this week to a listener in Australia, Lord Funkington, at Lord_Funkington on the Twitter. He and I had a fun little spirited battle here on Twitter this week as the United States women's national soccer team kicked off their World Cup this week against Australia in convincing fashion, 3-1. So best of luck to the ladies. Hope they bring home the World Cup here this summer. And that's my shout out for Lord Funkington. Hey, if you want a shout out here on the program, there are a number of ways you can do it. One, you can always email me insidethejungle@spnt.tv. You can hit me up on the Twitter at Nick Superling. You can also follow Anthony and Scott. Scott's at Scott Bantel, and Anthony's at CJ Anthony CY. But the best way to get a shout out here on Inside the Jungle is to become a Patreon supporter of our Patreon campaign. You can do that by going to spnt.tv/Patreon. Any help that you can send our way goes a long way and makes the show that much better. The show is now a video podcast because of our support on Patreon. And here in a couple of weeks, we'll have an announcement as far as our Android and iOS apps, which will be available to download here soon. But in the meantime, if you can help out, we really do appreciate it. Just even $1 a month. I mean, it's only $12 a year, folks. Goes a long way in helping us out and do some cool things here with the podcast. So again, that address, spnt.tv/Patreon. Before we get out of here, what did we learn this week, AC?
I learned that I have swagger, which is awesome, and I got to bring more to the show. And I also learned that I owe a big debt of gratitude to both Google and Cox Communications for the technical difficulties that were experienced on my end earlier this evening. And if they end up sponsoring the show, I will gladly rescind that sarcastic remark. But for now, screw both of those people.
We got to figure it out. Once you bounced out and bounced back in, things seem to clear up. With good stuff. That's hey man, sometimes you can't help the interwebs. It is what it is. We found that out the hard way a couple weeks ago.
I know. I got swagger though, so that's all that matters.
You have swagger, absolutely. There's no question. You are our swaggerer here on this program. Scott, what did you learn this week?
Speaking of swagger, I learned that the Bengals need more swagger. That is what is holding them back in the playoffs is swagger.
And what did I learn?
I don't know, Nick. I'm not sure you're capable of learning anything anymore. You know all. So I don't know. I got nothing today.
You learned I have swagger, Nick. That's what you
I
learned.
did. I learned that the
too.
Bengals have the number 3 rated running back tandem in the AFC. Not the NFL, but the AFC behind the Buffalo Bills and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Go figure. Who knew they had such a great running back tandem up there in Buffalo? Before we get out of here, just a reminder, Inside the Jungle, we come to you live every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, right here at cincyjungle.com. But don't forget, if you do miss our live broadcast, you can always catch the audio and video on demand through the app of your choice, whether you're using Android or iOS, or who knows, maybe you're using a Windows phone. There aren't too many of you out there, but maybe you are. There are ways to get the show, the audio on demand at cincyjungle.com. You can find us in iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find Inside the Jungle. So make sure, if you do miss a live broadcast, which we'd love to have you here in the chat room. We've got so many great folks here in the chat room tonight. Villa Holtender, he's tuning in from England, so you know it's pretty late for him. Our friend Cody Toomey, Larry and Lenny Rolson were in the chat room at one point. Let's see. Tim Campbell, Gina Fairfield. Appreciate everybody tuning in live here at cincyjungle.com and participating in the chat room. The chat room is a lot of fun, so make sure, if you can catch us live at 8 o'clock, you join us. But if you can't, you can always download the show in on-demand format. We really do appreciate that and support the show by subscribing. Final thoughts as we wrap up 198, episode 198. We're 2 away from 200. Scott Bantel.
Well, final thoughts. I hear everyone down at Paul Brown Stadium looks good in shorts and T-shirts. So I hear championship in the near future.
Absolutely. How about you, AC?
My final thought is more of a question, and that is, I'm wondering what is in store for episode 200. Is it the taste of the NFL? Is it special guests? Or we got to do a big blowout here, Nick?
I'm kind of blown out from Lachey's. I'm still getting over that one.
True.
I don't know. I don't know. I have zero. As of right now, I have zero plans for episode 200. Things might be changing as far as my work schedule here soon. So maybe a time change. I have no idea. As of right now, I've got no plans. So maybe we'll just we'll kick it old school and just take phone calls at night. I don't know. I got
I
nothing.
put you on the spot. Sorry.
No, you're good. It's the summertime, right? My thoughts are on training camp and the fall and how we're going to accomplish getting these episodes out and trying to do a daily show in the fall if we can. If I can. We'll see. To be determined, that's for sure. Appreciate both of you for joining me tonight. Mickey, we missed you this week. He's off traveling yet again, and he'll be out next week as well. But appreciate UAC and Scott for joining me this week. And thanks for all you do for the show and for the website at cincyjungle.com. You guys, you do a fantastic job, so thanks.
Thank you. You as well, sir.
I think it's time to get out. Do you want to add one more thing, Scott? You're slow on the mute button. You got to be quicker on the trigger, man.
No, that was just my token. Miss the mute button. I gotta have one per show, and I was getting nervous that at 9:04 tonight that I had missed my opportunity. So I just wanted to miss it just once.
It started off as a slow night and it ended as a slow night here for
Right.
Scott. And thanks to everybody who tuned in live. Just remember, Inside the Jungle is an SPNT production. For more information about our other podcasts, you can log on to spnt.tv. Special thanks to our associate producers, Andy Lanham, Larry Rolson, Mike Vardy, and Fado by Ari. Make sure you check out cincyjungle.com. Everybody's doing a great job with articles. Josh, Jason, Rebecca, Anthony, Scott, Mickey, everybody's doing fantastic work. So check it out over at cincyjungle.com. Until next week, for AC and Scott, I'm Subes. We will see you later. Hooday, everybody!